So I've got a statement and then a question, I guess. And the statement would be this. I get that the bill doesn't go into effect until 100,000 acres are transferred with a deed from the federal government to the state of Utah. And I understand the historical equal footing idea that we should have had the land in the first place, and it's time that the federal government turn it over. With that general statement of understanding that we all agree pretty much that the land needs to be transferred back to the state of Utah, it should have never left the state of Utah in the first place. However, with that brief understanding, my question is this. If we've got plenty of time between now, say 3 years is kind of the statements that I've heard about, when 100,000 acres is transferred with a deed, then this bill would take effect. My question is it essential now to have the governor sign this bill and work on it after the fact, or would it be much better to see if we could put the bill on hold and have a broader-based focus group that could discuss this and bring up some of the concerns about Agenda 21, about the concerns regarding the sheriffs? I know the sheriffs are in support of the bill, but you know, oftentimes it takes another point of view. That's one of the geniuses of America, is the second point of view. I know this bill has been discussed for a couple of years, but when there's 1,000+ bills that go before the legislature every year, it's really hard for us unfunded conservatives oftentimes to bring up questions or to be, have a bill in focus to be able to really review it. It takes time, it takes money, it takes effort, it takes et cetera. And so I guess my question is this. Is it reasonable to say if the governor doesn't sign the bill, you know what, we all sit down, we work on it more, the concept is good, but maybe there's a couple of tweaks that could be had. Is that a reasonable hope?
You want to take that, Kevin?
Thank you for the great question, and I think I tried to address that a little bit in my earlier remarks. What the legislative process is a can be a very methodical and slow-moving process. It is not the bastion of efficiency, rightfully so, because we need to be very, very wise and provident in how we act and respond. What this does is this puts in place a beginning point for us. I would certainly expect, and frankly, as a co-sponsor and as working on this, we anticipated that there would be amendments, most likely each of the next 3 years, building upon the opportunity. If we hadn't put this bill, and if this bill wasn't before the governor to be signed today, we wouldn't be having this meeting. And this meeting is part of the counseling together, bringing all the stakeholders together to modify and refine in the coming years. That's how I would respond. And so it's very important that this moves forward in this way. I would respond.
Let me say one thing to Sam too, okay? This may not be a Supreme Court resolution. This may actually be a congressional resolution. We could get this bill passed. If it is a congressional resolution, the importance of this bill is that we're getting it out. The fact that you are here today, Sam, the fact that some of the talk shows have attacked me for this bill because it takes away the power of the sheriff, what we'll talk about later, which is not true. The fact that we've got that out there and it doesn't take effect, it's in the legislative arena. It's a placeholder bill. I have promised that if there's anything in this bill that in any way affects the users of these public lands, we will make changes. We will make that happen. But we've got to be ready. It's out there now. It's how I do business in the light of day. It went through the committees. You saw that. So that's what we're trying to do now. I think the governor ought to comment on that one too.
I want to make these comments with Lieutenant Governor, and any comment directed at him will continue this question and answer after that point. Lieutenant Governor, you have a response.
Sure, yeah, no, and I appreciate that. You've outlined the legislative process very well. It is a messy process. I for one, as a rural former county commissioner, someone who still lives in rural Utah in a county with a lot of public land, I'm jumping for joy that we got something like this passed. I wasn't sure we would ever get here. And so I understand there are some concerns, and we absolutely agree that we need to continue to talk about those. I've yet to hear any concerns, again, that rise to the level of a veto without the support of those who worked so hard to get this passed. We will have opportunities. In fact, if you look at legislation, I think probably 80% or more of the bills that are passed are tweaks or fixes to bills that were passed last year or the year before. That's what we do. That's by design. That's the way this process works. And so we're going to continue to work together. Again, I know we're going to talk more about about this. There's nothing in this bill that changes the relationship with law enforcement in the state right now. There's nothing that changes any of that. This is something that is being put in place for a hopeful eventual day when those come back to us. So these guys are definitely the experts. I will tell you that the governor is just now starting to do his deep dive into all of this. While we work with all of those bills as they're starting, as you mentioned, there are over 1,000 bills to begin with. We're working on those during the session, and now's our time to really dive in deeply. We've got our attorneys looking at this. We'll continue to talk about it, but as of right now, we're very encouraged with what we're seeing and really the leadership that Utah is taking on this issue for other states in the West.
This bill shows the world that we're going to keep these lands public. That's the greatest question we've had is, how are you going to manage these lands? Are we going to still have public lands in Utah? Can I still take my OHV out there? Can I run my cows? Can we get minerals out of the ground? That's what this bill shows us right now. Absolutely doesn't take anything away from the sheriff, and we'll get into that later, Chad.
Okay, very good. Any other questions from this audience for Lieutenant Governor?
Thank you. My name's Scott Bradley, and I drove down from Cache Valley just to maybe have a little say in this and hope that perhaps the thoughts that I give might be just considered. And I'm so thankful that we're thinking ahead, that we've got some program in which we're looking down the road a little bit and seeing how we might manage these lands at the time that they do come into the state again, as they should have been from the beginning. But I have a concern, and I thank you, Representative, that you're saying we're going to tweak this. That's a magnificent promise, and I'm going to hold you to it.
I've
because
said
I want
that
to
from the
participate
beginning.
in that.
I've said it from the beginning. I said it in committee. Go listen to my testimony, so it's out there.
Well, for the Lieutenant Governor particularly, because you probably have the ear of the governor. And I think it's in his office, if I'm right on that. So I'm a little concerned that this creates a division of land management. Division of land management sounds notoriously like Bureau of Land Management. You change the D to a B, or a B to a D, or whatever. And I see this as being a mini-me kind of thing, where the BLM oversight is being transferred to the state. Now, it's nice that we've got it closer to our state, but honestly, the state takes ownership and control of all federal lands. It has the power to create all regulations under this bill pertaining to the use of land. It establishes fees for access and use of land. It has the power to create an independent policing agency. Despite of the fact it mentions the sheriff, it goes on in the next line to say that there'll be an independent policing agency. It has the power to enforce the regulations on the land, the power to adjudicate things that come up in question for an internal court system, if you will. And all of these things violate the separation of powers that have been Americanist from the very beginning of this country. And the power to transfer any land is withheld until approved. So, in short, it really does create an all-powerful Utah czar of lands. And I'm very concerned that so many of the abuses that have historically gone with BLM, with the wording of this bill, it depends on who takes control, who takes charge, who gets the philosophy to run the DLM as to how this will be. The Americanist way really is stewardship, individual ownership. And we've just been promised, Representative, by you that this will keep our lands in public. The source of all wealth comes from the land. Yeah. And stewardship with private ownership is important. And it seems weird to say to me that we're going to have a socialist program from the nation that's just going to be transferred to our state to operate these lands, and a continued government-operated thing, the very definition of socialism, government ownership and control. So I'm hoping as we go forward with this, because I presume that the governor's favorably inclined, that there'll be an opportunity to talk about the fact that ownership doesn't always remain with the state.
So the question I would have, Scott, for you is, do you have a way that we would manage these lands in some way that's different than what's in the bill, or some way that you would change the bill in any drastic way? Let me just answer one thing about we give the authority for a law enforcement group, okay? So the multiple use and sustained yield, which we manage, it deals with domestic livestock, fish and wildlife, mineral exploration, rights of ways, outdoor recreation, timber production, and wilderness conservation. Those are the issues. Some of those we won't have to have any kind of a law enforcement person. It says the division director may get a certified officer a police officer, a peace officer, okay? So let's say the issue has to do with wildlife, and it's in the bill. Right now, the authority for wildlife for Title 23 in the code is through a wildlife conservation officer, Division of Wildlife Resource. He is a peace officer. He doesn't investigate murders. He doesn't go in and deal with that. So all he has is primary authority over that section of the code, period. If we put anybody else, and let's say we want to do grazing, as it mentions here, livestock grazing. Who do we have in the counties right now that deal right now with livestock? You have the brand inspector. He's a certified police officer with authority given him by the state. Every one of these sheriffs in here, their authority to be a peace officer is given by the state of Utah. It's not independent. They can't even be a sheriff without being certified by the state of Utah. So if that's something we want to change, I am 100% open to that. We want to make the sheriff a constitutional officer and increase his duties. I've got a statement right here from their legal counsel, chief legal counsel, which is Reed Richards. It says, I believe this bill not only doesn't take power away from the sheriff, it enhances the power of the sheriff. Just like my bill did many years ago that said the sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer in the county. That remains so. I can see your concern, but if there's something in the wording that you think we need to change.
Law enforcement issue is a minor issue.
Yeah.
This is actually part of our show content. I wanted to give Lieutenant Governor out here.
Maybe let him give a response.
And so, Lieutenant Governor, if you have a response to
Yeah.
this, then we're going to let you go.
I do. Thank you, and thank you for the question. And let me concur with what Representative Noel said about tweaking. We believe in that. We're in favor of that. We agree with that. We don't get to tweak, unfortunately. We just get to sign or veto what is ever in front of the governor. And as I mentioned before, he's predisposed to supporting this. We think this is a great step forward, but something that we're definitely willing to continue to look at. The nice thing about getting that authority away from the federal government and back to the states is that we have the opportunity to now manage these lands in a way that works better for the citizens of the state of Utah. Some of these lands will become private lands, and that's important. Some of them will always be public lands. And as Representative Noel mentioned, we have 100 years of rights associated with those lands, and those rights need to be protected as well, whether those are grazing rights, whether those are rights of way, and we need the ability to do that on those lands, and we can't do that without some sort of government involvement, and our hope is that will be at a much lower and a much less level than what we're seeing right now at the federal government.
Hope we'll have a chance for follow-ons later
thank
with
you.
Representative Noel.
Okay, thank you.